What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Culture FC, the weekly soccer show where we cover all culturally relevant aspects of the beautiful game. We cover lifestyle, fashion, music, politics, all of the things happening off of the pitch, just none of the stuff happening on it. My name is Louie, and I'm joined here with my co-host Alan. Unfortunately, our other co-host Brendan is not here, but fortunately he is in Denmark having a great time. We should see him back next week, and we hope he had a great time. And remember to bring us some scarves. We are 7 days away from the start of the World Cup as of this recording. You will most likely be getting this episode the week that the World Cup starts. But it is here. It is so close you can almost taste it. With the World Cup being so close to starting, we decided that this week we wanted to preview the World Cup. We dove into a wide range of topics from politics to racism to what it would mean for countries to win the World Cup. And we try to cover as much ground as possible. If you like this podcast, don't forget to leave us that 5-star review on either iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you may get your podcast. It really helps us rank higher, and we really, really appreciate it. If you can't get enough of us, you can also follow us on Instagram at culturef.c. We post behind-the-scenes videos, pictures, just different things that you don't necessarily get to see or hear in the regular podcast. We also have our own clothing brand. It is called Treble, and you can find us on Instagram at Treblewear. Treblwear. It's a clothing company that's run by the three of us, and we design everything, we make everything, and we would just really appreciate it if you could check it out. This week we do have something special though. These guys from the FIFA World Cup trophy glass sent us a few different sets of these amazing World Cup glasses. They are commemorating the Russian World Cup, and we are actually giving away 2 sets. For you to be entered to win, it is very simple. All you have to do is go to the video version of this podcast, either on Facebook or YouTube, and just comment who you think is going to win the World Cup. That is as simple as it gets. All you got to do is write which country you think will win. If you're selected to win, we will send you an entire set of these glasses, as well as a couple of stickers and even something from our own clothing brand. So go over to YouTube or Facebook once this video gets put out and comment who you think is going to win the World Cup. While you're over there on our Facebook or YouTube, take a quick second to either like or follow us or subscribe. You know, we post several other kinds of videos as well. We have other shows that we put out pretty regularly, so if you only listen to this podcast, go check that out as well. I do think that's enough rambling, though. Let's get into what you came for and get hyped for the World Cup. Cup-related news topics. First one is Peru captain and their best player, Paulo Guerrero, will be allowed to play in the World Cup. Paulo Guerrero was banned for doping about a year ago, and then they cleared him to play, and then they banned him again, and now they cleared him one more time, and now he will be officially allowed to play in the World Cup.
Yeah, I think they found coke in his system.
Yeah, I think that there was a coke and some other stuff. He claims, the story's crazy. He claims that he went on this museum trip and he touched a mummy, and there was remnants of this chemical that they used to embalm people, and that got into his system somehow, and that's what he used as his
Did he touch it with his tongue? I'm just confused how touching a drug now lets it go into your body. What?
I'm not sure, but if Paulo Guerrero went in and started licking mummies, then there's other things that we need to be worrying about other than coke use.
Yeah, it was kind of cool because a bunch of captains from teams came out and signed a petition to actually bring him back and allow him to play. They must have believed his story, which is kind of crazy to me, but whatever, they believe him. They signed the petition. FIFA, which I actually kind of respect, kind of took the petition for what it was and allowed him back in.
Right, and it's actually a really cool moment of solidarity where everyone came together and was like, yeah, let's, Peru doesn't have much of a chance without him, so let's allow him to play so it's at least a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So it ends up working out in FIFA's favor. Sure, they take a little bit of a hit of allowing this dude who got banned for doping to play, but at the same time, it would be his last World Cup, which, first of all, it'd be his first World Cup because Peru haven't made it in 36 years or whatever it is, but it'd be his last possible World Cup. He's getting up there in age, and who knows when Peru's going to make it back to the World Cup.
I will say this, Peru has, don't they have a plant that has something with coke in it? Their culture I know I think they're like addicted to this plant. Honestly, I've seen, and someone can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think that they have it in their tea. It's like a plant that they put in tea, they drink in, and a lot of their players actually get can fall victim to not passing a drug test because of this. I just can't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think they use like the coca tea leaves that they use to like, because what happens with cocaine, they actually have to like go and do like a chemical process to make the drug, but it all comes from a leaf. So I have heard, it's not this first time I've heard it. Yeah. I've heard it before that they've used like the coca leaf as like tea. Yeah. And a lot of times I've also heard it that like they used to do it like you would take the leaf and just kind of chew on it, and it would help you if you had like a headache or whatever it is, you know. Yeah. People didn't know.
I've definitely seen pictures of people in Peru like chewing on the leaf. So that does sound pretty legit. Yeah. So I'll give him credit.
So we don't know if he was chewing on leaves or licking mummies, but we're just happy Paulo Guerrero is going to be able to play in the World Cup. Yeah. And it'll be great to see what he can do.
Yeah, they just played a friendly. He scored their only 2 goals or 2 of their goals. So I think they need him.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, moving on to the next topic. We're going to be talking a little bit about Nigeria. So we talked about their jerseys that came out, Nike. I mean, they blew up. They were like revolutionary design. It's super cool. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. We'll have the link.
Well, hold on though. If you haven't seen them, where have you been living?
Yeah,
it's been.
If you haven't seen them, you will definitely see them in the streets a lot because they actually sold 3 million jerseys in like under 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it was all pre-sale too.
Yeah,
which is insane. Like, think about it. Like 3 million jerseys. Not to mention all the counterfeit ones that are out there, too. It's like 3 million official jerseys on Nike's website, on pre-orders, sold out within minutes.
Yeah. And then it's raised kind of an interesting question because those 3 million weren't all just Nigerian fans, right? So we've seen a lot of instances now where people of all different cultures, all different backgrounds are rocking this Nigeria jersey. And there have kind of been people like, is this a little bit of cultural appropriation? Is it appropriate for this white guy from England to be rocking the Nigeria jersey? I personally don't think there's any problem with it. I think jerseys, I mean, it's definitely more common, let's say, with like the NBA, where you could be a Celtics fan, but you'll wear a Pelicans jersey, you know. There isn't that kind of loyalty behind the jerseys. For soccer, it's a little bit, I mean, you don't really want to cross that line, but we're in such an age where fashion and soccer are coming together that I don't necessarily see a problem with it. Especially, I don't know, Nigeria isn't like a world footballing power, so it's not like if I were Brazil rocking an Argentina jersey, there's definitely a problem there. But if I'm the Brazil fan, I don't necessarily have a rivalry with Nigeria, so me wearing their jersey doesn't necessarily make me a poser or anything like that. But I don't know. I definitely can see the arguments against it and why people would be like, dude, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, jerseys have transcended just being sporting attire, and we've talked about this before. How soccer jerseys have moved very wholeheartedly into fashion, which is why Nike's experienced such success with this Nigeria kit, is because it is very fashionable. They did a full-on fashion release. Like, they had, the full tracksuit, which I find so sick. Yeah. And, like, they did a legitimate fashion launch with this kit. And so I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think that the people who are complaining about, the cultural appropriation, there's just nothing in it. I mean, I think about this. Like, I've seen a million people... Not a million, but I've seen a bunch of people out there wearing Brazil jerseys, but they're not all Brazil fans. Like, for some, I don't know why I brought this up, but like, I thought about this. I remember one of my favorite movies on the planet, Superbad, and the scene where they go to the party and the dude's wearing the Brazil jersey, like that just sticks out in my mind. Like it's just, I think it's just moving into mainstream culture. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think it's awesome that Nigeria's moved, like the Nigeria kids moving into the mainstream culture. I think having them be ingrained in popular culture is only going to help Nigeria. It's only going to help the support for Nigeria. It's only going to help the support for Africa as a whole too, because it's just such a cool, iconic, like, it's just very Nigeria. So it's just like, from now for the next 40, 50 years, people are going to be talking about this jersey. Like, it's going to be ingrained in popular culture. In 15 years, some hipster's going to wear it in like a music video or something.
Yeah, I'm going to wait till I can find it in a Salvation Army or something and buy it for $10.
Yeah. And so it's just going to be part of like popular culture from here on out. And I think it's awesome. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's just a matter of, like you said, I think you hit all the main points. There's, as a Brazil fan, Brazil doesn't have a competition with, like, a big rivalry with Nigeria. So if I bought one of those jerseys, like, I might not look good in it.
Yeah.
But that's a different point. Yeah. But I'd wear it. I wouldn't have any issues with it.
Yeah. But I think people that are claiming the cultural appropriation thing are just looking for a race issue to kind of point this to.
I mean, and we don't need any more of those because moving into this World Cup, I'm sure we'll have plenty.
Yeah,
we don't need to be bashing Nigeria for having really cool jerseys.
Yeah.
I think we're
let people wear jerseys.
Yeah. But moving on to the last news topic, Raheem Sterling recently got a AK-47 tattoo on his leg, and all across England and even across the world, people have been calling to have him excluded from the World Cup team.
Yeah.
This is the point that England fans have gotten to, where one of their best players and one of the only people who can give him any chance to actually do something in the World Cup, they want to exclude him because of a gun tattoo.
Yeah. He had to come out on Instagram and explain that I think his father was shot down or something, and he shoots with his right leg or something, so he promised that football would keep him away from guns. I don't really know the whole story, but there was a positive connotation behind the gun. There have been a lot of people saying that the reason why he's getting targeted so heavily is because he is black, and there are a lot of racist issues behind why he's kind of being targeted. Piers Morgan came out and was saying a bunch of bullshit about him and saying that someone shouldn't be posting things that promote kind of a negative image, and then the next day he posts a picture smoking a cigar, and people were like, dude, I don't want my kids smoking, like, you shouldn't be doing this. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I used to really think, for some reason I used to think England was like this nice, peaceful country, but they have a lot of the same kind of racial issues and racial tensions that we're experiencing now in the U.S. So it's super interesting to see how even their superstar players are treated. I mean, normally you wouldn't expect the superstar players to be berated and kind of hated on, but I mean, even in England, it's still an issue.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's in a football mad country like England where you think like, all right, and a lot of times you see that what happens with superstars is they're allowed to pretty much do whatever they want, and as long as you continue producing, no one cares. So it's weird that like in England where it's a football mad country where every single World Cup they get very disillusioned with the idea of England actually being able to win something, and then they get sad when they lose. You would think, all right, maybe we actually have a chance with Sterling. He's been having a phenomenal season. Yeah. Maybe let's not give him shit for this.
Yeah.
But back to the Piers Morgan thing. Gary Lineker, right after that, came out, because Piers Morgan's an Arsenal fan, he came out and was like, well, then, if, he can't have a AK-47 tattoo, then we should just get rid of the gun on the Arsenal badge. Yeah. And it was just like...
The Twitter exchange was awesome, because there's a meme that came out, and basically everyone was saying, okay, I'll fix this. Someone photoshopped out the cannon. Then someone was like, well, you can't have a shield because that represents war. So someone took out the shield, and then at the end of the meme, it was just a circle left for the Arsenal badge. So the internet won on that one, which I really appreciated.
Right, and I mean, I don't even think Raheem Sterling needs to defend himself.
No.
Who gives a shit? Yeah. It's a piece of art.
Yeah.
And it's whatever his reasoning is. He said he'd never touch a gun because his father was killed. Like, who cares?
Right.
It's a tattoo.
Right.
If you're getting that hung up, on a tattoo on the dude's leg, he didn't even have to post anything on Instagram.
Right.
It's his body. He can do whatever the hell he wants. Yeah, he's an idol, but he's not out there shooting people.
Yeah.
He's literally like, he doesn't. And the other thing he said too is like, it's not done, because he was like, I'm still gonna work on this tattoo. Yeah. It's just the beginning
still in
of
progress,
it.
right?
And it was just like ridiculous how much backlash he got. Like, there were papers left and right all across England, even in the world. They made worldwide news.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have.
No, absolutely not. I think that it's his body. Let him do what he wants with it. I mean, it's totally different if it were like a swastika or something like that. But I mean, guns, if you see him in movies, if you're gonna berate him for putting a tattoo of it, don't let your kids watch any violent movie. Don't let them play Fortnite, which I'm sure they're playing. Don't let them do anything like that that's gonna allow them to experience what shooting a gun is like. But yeah, I think it's so frustrating that like there's still people having to deal with these racial issues in 2018.
Right. And the other thing too is like, don't just jump down his throat without hearing his explanation, right? Like, don't start judging him without knowing why he's doing it. You had all these papers calling him out and basically insinuating all of these things without actually discussing it with him or even taking into his account like his personal history. Right. Like, the guy he's never really done anything bad. He's been a pretty exemplary like player. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he's done a lot of good things for communities and stuff. And it's just like they throw that all out the window because he's a young black British man and he has a gun tattoo. Yeah. And I find that baffling.
I honestly think for the the FA should take action and just block those journalists or even the organizations that they work for from going to press conferences, right? Start showing that you actually care for the players and you're not going to allow these players to be berated so heavily, and maybe these newspapers will stop writing just bullshit.
Well, it's funny because the English press have such a bad track record when it comes to berating their own players, and you've seen it with, you know, when Beckham got a red card in, I think, was it 2002? They made effigy, or was it 98? They made effigies of him and burnt like little things of him when they got back from the World Cup, and it was just like, these people just take it so to this next level in England. Not that Brazilians and South Americans don't, but like for some reason, because the media is involved in England, it just seems to all get blown out of proportion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not the way you want to be treating your team going into a World Cup.
Especially not your star player. Yeah. It's not like this is Johnny on the bench over there. Yeah. This is Raheem Sterling, who should be starting for you, and one of the only chances you guys have of actually producing something at the World Cup.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on to the World Cup preview. So today's episode, we're trying to just kind of tackle as many of the culturally relevant issues surrounding this World Cup and try to get a little bit of a taste for everything. And so I kind of want to start off with, you know, a couple of moments to watch out for, and basically started off with the racism and how we're expecting that to impact the Russian World Cup.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, I mean, Russia has a lot of issues politically. You know, they don't really like the LGBT community. The racism is a very big issue in Russia still, more so than in the U.S., which is just kind of crazy there. It's more openly accepted. So people have been kind of worried about, I mean, you have a lot of non-white people showing up to the World Cup, both to play and to root for their teams. What's going to happen? And recently, actually, that FIFA just took kind of an important step, I think a little too late, but an important step, that they're giving their referees the power now to actually take one of three steps if they see any instances of racism happening on the pitch, or in the fans, sorry, and that includes stopping, suspending, or even all out abandoning a match if the ref deems that that's necessary.
Wow. That is, I will say, I wish they had said this a while ago, because this has been an issue since the day they announced the World Cup back in 2010 when they announced the 2018 World Cup. So it's like, the fact that it's taken them, within a few weeks of the World Cup to announce this is a little...
Yeah.
It's almost like people were putting a lot of pressure on them, as they should have, and for them to really just, like, finally be coming out saying it, like, okay, great, I'm happy that they did it, but it was also like, could have done this before.
Right. I wonder, because racism will happen, I think for sure in the stands. I wonder how predominant it has to be for a ref to pick it up, and if a ref will actually do anything to do it, right? Because logistically, abandoning a World Cup match is a lot of money.
Especially if it's already underway and everyone's at the stadium. Right. And now all of a sudden you have an entire stadium full of angry people.
Scheduling conflicts. I mean, there's a whole host of things that happens. Does a referee have the courage, and or is he actually being promoted behind the scenes to actually take any action if things like this are happening?
Right, so it's almost like that question of, is this a surface level thing where FIFA's just saying it, but then they're also secretly behind the doors being like, hey, unless you know it's really, really bad, let's not do anything. Because it must be a logistical nightmare, because not only do you have to coordinate with all the fans and the players and the staff and all of that, but you have to coordinate with each city's officials in terms of traffic, police, you know, the metro. Everything has to be coordinated for the World Cup to actually work out. And so for someone to abandon a match, it's going to have to be something catastrophic. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. I really hope it goes, this World Cup just flies without a hitch. But, you know, from everything we've been seeing, racism has been one of the main talking points leading up to this World Cup. I wish it was actually more of a talking point. I feel like not enough people are focusing on this issue. Because a very big number of any of the racial instances that we've seen in world football have actually happened in Russia, either in Champions League games being played in Russia, or even, I remember, I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before, when William from the Brazilian national team played in Russia at Anzi Machacalakalakala, he received racial abuse. Roberto Carlos, who is he's a pretty light-skinned Brazilian. He's like a tan guy. He's not really, I wouldn't consider him, black. He's a tan dude. He received racial abuse, and he was the manager of Anzi Machacalakalaka.
They do not discriminate when it comes to who they discriminate against.
Right.
Like, if you're not white, they're going to discriminate against you.
You're not pale. You're not
right.
one of us.
You're not one of them. So, I hope nothing happens, honestly, but we'll have to see. Unfortunately, I think things are going to happen, and that's similar with the hooliganism, right? We had the whole episode on hooliganism, and I mentioned how I would not be showing up to Russia for the World Cup.
Right.
It's going to happen. I hope that the government takes the appropriate steps to protect the fans that are showing up. You don't want to see people getting hurt when they're going to go enjoy the world's most beautiful game.
I just really hope that in no instance is England allowed to play Russia.
Yeah.
Like, if that is to happen, just shut down the World Cup, call it quits, let it go. If Russia and England play each other, done. Yeah. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly. But in terms of hooliganism, we recommend that you swing back and listen to our episode on hooliganism, because we actually touched upon a lot of the points of the World Cup with hooliganism. So we'll just kind of skip that over for today. But another moment to watch out for is also doping. Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this as well. The Russian FA has actually been pretty supportive of doping their own players, because Russia really wants to make an impact in this World Cup, and they've kind of come out and said that we will dope our players.
Yeah. No, Russia just doesn't give a fuck about the rules. They kind of make their own rules. It's such a blemish on the sport if the Russians do decide to come and do that. I mean, I think they'll know that there are going to be actions taken against them, but you never know. They may just be like, whatever, we still want it, who cares? Yeah. I think, along with Russia, I was actually reading an interesting article the other day about how Spain has a really bad doping problem. So I think now that they're kind of being highlighted more, and I'll try to find the article and link it, and maybe we can even have another whole episode on this. But Spain has been kind of low-key having these weird doping treatments, and Pep Guardiola has even kind of fallen victim to it before, where they kind of send players to Spain and they're recovered miraculously within a couple of weeks. So that'll be interesting as well, because Russia gets a lot of the bad credit for it, but we'll see if Spain gets in any trouble for it, if their history gets tarnished because of it.
Maybe Paulo Guerrero decides to lick some mummies while he's in Russia, and they have to ban him again.
Bring more mummies up there, yeah.
He's going to pull a hat trick of banning.
Yeah, again, you never want to see a tournament be blemished by these unfortunate events. Yeah, I'll call them, but who knows?
I mean, I think the last thing we should really be on the lookout for is how the Russian political scene impacts the World Cup. Right. Like, what does Putin do? Right. Does he just keep everything under wraps and just tries to be a nice, gentle president of Russia and just is fine with everything. Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on all of that. With that being said, and we, roping all that together, we've talked about how a very huge number of Americans are flying to the World Cup to watch games and be present at the stadium. But I wanted to pose the question, who should American soccer fans root for? Like, if you don't, and of course we're excluding the people who have family in other countries, but like as a general, honest to goodness American, who should they root for?
It's a good question. I think...
Before you answer, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sports Illustrated and also Alexi Lalas have come out and said that Americans should root for Mexico. And this is very troublesome because in terms of rivalry, I'm not saying that, these two clubs or these two countries are very prestigious, I guess, but their rivalry is pretty heated. Yeah. The U.S. has a huge rivalry with Mexico in terms of soccer, so it's like, how do you think Americans should root for Mexico?
Absolutely not. And this goes against a lot of the topics that we talk about and how rivalry builds the sport into what it is, and rivalry is so important for the game of soccer. If they are promoting that, they're kind of going against what I think builds such an amazing sport. Mexico and the U.S., by far, Mexico is the U.S.'s biggest rival when it comes to soccer.
Mostly because they play each other every year.
Right. And that's okay, right? That's totally okay, but in no way, shape, or form should the U.S. now be rooting for Mexico. You don't want to see them succeed. I understand that maybe what is the reasoning behind why
the reasoning behind this is because technically they're North American, so it's like, you're a part of our continent. Right. Let's root for you.
No, there's no continent loyalty in this. Like, as a Brazilian soccer fan, I would never root for Argentina to win a World Cup.
I would never root for any South American country.
Just because I want South America to win it, absolutely not. I think that's an atrocious idea. I think the U.S. should just root for an underdog. Just pick an underdog. The Americans love an underdog story. I think most people do. Just root for an underdog. Pick an Iceland and Egypt. So one of these teams, root for them and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I say, in my head, do not root for Mexico. With one exception, with one small exception. I think that as an American, we are all immigrants, regardless of how you look at it. I say find the closest relative you have that isn't American and root for that country. Yeah. So if that happens to be that, let's say you are a Mexican-American, and let's say even if you've rooted for the U.S. men's national team for 10 years, but your parents are Mexican fans, root for Mexico. That's the one exception.
I agree with that, absolutely.
But let's say you're from Ohio and your grandparents came from, I don't know, France.
Yeah.
Root for France.
Yeah.
Or maybe if that's not a very apparent thing and you don't have that, here's a funny thing.
Ancestry.com, I think you can figure out who.
So here's a really interesting thing about that. 23andMe is a company that does DNA testing.
Yeah.
They've been putting out a World Cup commercial for the past month on Fox Sports about finding your heritage. And I found it so interesting. I wish I had brought this up like a month ago when I first saw it, but essentially they have these ads that have been coming out being like, hey, discover what your ancestry is, which I found genius by them, especially because of this topic. Americans aren't the U.S. men's national team isn't in the World Cup, so 23andMe is like, hey, this is what we do. Like, come find out your ancestry.
That is awesome. That if anyone's looking for a way out from supporting the U.S., go do that, because maybe you might be a Brazil supporter and you'd be so blessed.
Just come over to the dark side, come root for us, and
no, that's an awesome advertisement.
It's such a great opportunity.
I wish I had seen that.
Yeah.
I'll look at
I was watching MLS games last weekend, and it just kept popping up every halftime. It would come up, and I was like, wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So yeah, I say if you have the money, go do it. By no means are they sponsoring this podcast, but if they'd like to sponsor this podcast, we are more than happy to listen.
Absolutely.
But find out who you can support, or if you don't have anyone to support, I don't know, root for Iceland. They only have 300,000 people living in their country. They could use all the support they need.
Yeah. You were saying they were throwing out Facebook ads to help support them. So, I mean, they're definitely looking for as much support as they can. So, if they...
Yeah, it's such a crazy concept, though. As a Brazilian, I would never be able to root for, say, Argentina.
No.
Oh, my God, no.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me.
But moving right along, still on the topic of Americans in the World Cup, I have a very interesting question to ask. Will Fox Sports ruin the World Cup for all of us living in the United States? The reason I ask this is because Fox Sports paid an unprecedented $425 million for the TV rights of the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. They got it from ESPN, and this was actually before the U.S. failed to qualify.
Yeah. But
they announced today that they're basically half-assing the whole thing. They have a team of 8 commentators for the World Cup, but only 4 of them are actually going to be in Russia in the stadiums commentating on these games.
Yeah.
And on top of it, 8 of these 12 commentators are American, straight up just American, which is, there's nothing wrong with it in just that instance, but it's also like the World Cup is very diverse.
Yeah.
The United States is a very diverse country. And basically, I'm very weary of this, because the ability that you have to actually commentate a game when you're sitting in the stadium and you can experience the atmosphere firsthand is so different than, these 8 other commentators having to sit in a studio in LA so far removed from the action to commentate these games.
It's almost, it's not almost, it is, you're listening to people who are also watching a game on TV comment about a game that you could be also commentating.
You might as well watch the game on mute.
Yeah, there's no excitement there. And I remember actually experiencing kind of this when a long time ago, when beIN Sports was kind of just getting into soccer. They were showing a lot of the Spanish league, like they still do today, but they didn't have actual commentators in the stadium. And I remember the commentating being so bland, because you don't have that kind of outside noise that comes from actually commentating in the stadium. Yeah.
they're not feeding off the atmosphere
No,
either. Like, if
absolutely
the
not.
crowd's
It's just-
cheering and getting loud, you're going to get loud.
I mean, they're hearing this. A lot of commentating is often kind of being able to pick up on things in the stadium and relaying that to the listener at home. When you're experiencing it the same way that we are on TV, you can't do that. You're really just adding the same things that we're probably already thinking in our heads, right? So, for me, that's really, really poor, and especially you don't want to see these things be half-assed in a country where we want to promote the growth of the sport as much as we do. It's just, honestly, it's embarrassing.
It's such an embarrassment. This is the world's biggest sporting event.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. This is the world's biggest event, period.
Right.
There's nothing that is bigger than the World Cup in the history of the world.
Absolutely not.
And Fox Sports is cutting corners, cutting their budget. Because, in other words, they're hiring the cheapest commentators they can, not hiring the best team, only sending 4 of them to Russia. That's not okay. To give you a comparison, in 2014, ESPN sent 5 pairs of commentators to Brazil, and they called all but 13 games live from the stadiums.
Yeah.
The other 13 games were called from a broadcast center, but it wasn't in the United States. It was in Rio. So at least they were within the culture and experiencing all of that firsthand. So why do I give a shit what 8 people in Los Angeles are talking about when they haven't been out in the street? Because the other thing we have to think about is, if you're in this country traveling, you get to experience what the country is.
Absolutely.
And so as a color commentator, when you get to comment on these little things as well, like, oh man, like I remember an instance I remember from the 2014 World Cup that I actually heard about from a commentator is during an Argentina game, they were talking about how some Argentinians went to Brazil and were actually sleeping on the beaches in Rio in like a big caravan with other fans, not because they didn't have hotels, but just because it was more fun and there was like a fan fest going on at the beach. And so these kind of things you don't really get to experience unless you're there in Russia. So why do I care what 8 people in Los Angeles are experiencing about the World Cup? They're experiencing the same shit I am.
Yeah.
I could look all this up on the internet. I don't need them to tell me that.
Absolutely.
And so
what I liked about ESPN's coverage as well is that they made sure that they brought in a lot of ex-players, managers, guys that weren't just American, right? They brought in other influences from other cultures, different perspectives that the American culture might not understand, but that a Michael Ballack, I remember him, Ruud van Nistelrooy, these kind of guys that understand the culture and what the sport means in these other countries, that kind of make it super interesting during the World Cup to learn these little things, these little traditions, these little pieces of heritage that these countries carry with them to the World Cup every year. And Fox not doing that and not having these kind of experienced people, different cultures, different backgrounds there, really is poor decision making on their part.
Oh, of course. And I mean, the list of of Fox Sports commentators, honestly, only a few of them even jump out to me as people that I would even want to listen to. John Strong and Stuart Holden. I'm actually not a big fan of Stuart Holden's commentary. I think he could have been a great commentator, but I think he kind of got wrapped up into this, he kind of just followed suit with what the American commentators were also doing. I'm not a fan of his. I think his commentating is not very good. I think John Strong's not bad. Warren Barton's okay. But the rest of them, they're not great. But for ESPN to have on their resume people like Michael Ballack in the studio to be able to talk about the World Cup, and now you have Fox Sports barely, basically trying to put together this makeshift thing.
Right.
Guys, you literally spent so much money to get these rights, and you're literally just throwing it away.
Yeah.
It seems a little ridiculous. So I hope, my answer to the original question is, I hope Fox Sports doesn't ruin the World Cup, because
as well.
I won't let them ruin it. If they suck, I will watch the games some other way.
I mean, to be honest, my family, we'd normally, if the Brazilian networks aren't displaying it, we'll watch it on Telemundo.
Oh yeah.
We don't know. I mean, it's just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
They really like the way they announce it's super exciting. You've definitely probably heard.
Well, for me, if it's a Brazil game, I'm listening to it on Globo. If it's not a Brazil game, I'll watch it on the American stream or whatever it is. But
yeah, so I personally don't think it won't ruin it for me, but I hope that they don't ruin it for anyone else.
Well, if you're out there listening, let us know after the World Cup. Let us know how you thought about Fox Sports, and we'll definitely circle back on this topic because it's something that we really want to keep a lookout for. But yeah, kind of moving on, Nike and Adidas have both released some World Cup commercials.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to talk about it because commercials are such a important aspect, at least in my mind, for the World Cup. And it seems like Nike manages to knock it out of the park every single World Cup. And this year, it was no different. They released a commercial called Vai na Brasileiragem. It was a commercial centered around the Brazilian national team and what it means to be a Brazilian during the World Cup. And I'm going to link it in the description below. And I don't know if it's maybe too biased of my part that I loved it so much, but it was just like, as a Brazilian, I was able to identify with it so much, and it just really hyped me up for the World Cup.
Oh, yeah. The overall feedback in the Twitterverse and the internets has been really positive. I mean, you really understand what the World Cup means, not only to Brazil, but kind of the world weirdly enough, to the world through this ad. Even though it is Brazil-focused and Brazil-centric, you really get deep down what a World Cup means to a population.
Right.
Nike always does an amazing job at doing this. I don't know how. Whoever it is that's doing this for them, give them a raise, because I actually tweeted a few weeks back that I needed a Brazil commercial to come out with that reminded me of the Ronaldo one where Ronaldo they're in the airport, or even the Jogo Bonita days when they're like flicking it around in the locker rooms. So I was super pumped to see this one come out. It was amazing.
Oh, and then they had a specific callback to that commercial in this commercial.
Yeah, they had Fat Ronaldo, I'll call him.
Yeah.
They had him in the airport, so it was kind of nostalgic, and it was really cool to see them pull on these prior inspirations to make this ad.
And on top of it, Adidas also released their own commercial, which I forget the name of it. It was like Creativity.
Be creative. I got it here. Give me a second. Creativity is the answer.
Creativity is the answer, and it's a decent commercial. I thought it was okay. I think that in comparison to Nike's, it lacked a little bit.
Yeah. So the problem here is that where Nike's, I really understood that the commercial was about the World Cup and what it meant to people. The Adidas ad, to me, was just an ad for soccer. I didn't see any World Cup influences other than there being players from different parts of the world.
There wasn't much of a cultural connection.
No, absolutely not. They were just playing in a cage. We'll link this as well. They're just playing cage soccer, and people are kind of rooting for it. I didn't really understand the connection with the World Cup at all.
Yeah, it was more of it was as if they wanted to celebrate the World Cup but not talk about the World Cup. It was like, here's all our players that we have as, sponsors. And, they did their Adidas thing by bringing in other singers, rappers, other celebrities, which, in all fairness, has been working really well for Adidas over the last 2 years. And I find that the comparison between Nike and Adidas in this ad realm is very interesting, because Adidas has been kind of killing Nike in the soccer department over the last 2 years, whereas I feel like Adidas almost just kind of sat on things that have worked in the past, where they were just like, oh, this has been working for every single commercial we've released up until now, so let's just do it again. But what they forgot is that the World Cup is about bringing cultures together, and it's about what does it mean for these specific countries. And, Adidas has Leo Messi as their biggest signing. Why not do something centric on him and Argentina and what it means to be Argentinian and soccer? And what is even more interesting is that Beats came out with a commercial this morning, and I watched it when I woke up, and it was phenomenal. It was also for the World Cup, and it had Harry Kane, it had Russian cultural influence, which is actually the first time I've seen a commercial or someone focus on.
They did a really good job in the prior World Cup. I remember Mario Götze being one of their kind of star boys, which ended up being really great for them. But
I had forgot about that commercial. Now you just mentioned it, and I thought how great that one was.
Yeah.
And this one they had Neymar, Harry Kane, Benjamin Mendy actually, and a couple other people. So they did a better job than Adidas did by bringing in cultural references and even bringing it back to Russia.
Yeah, I think the issue with Adidas's advertisement as well is theirs seemed very focused on the actual product, whereas Nike was focusing specifically on the cultural aspects of soccer.
Right.
So I think Adidas has been very successful, like you said, with doing that, but they really missed the mark on this one, in my eyes.
It seems like they were just willing to be like, you know what, this is working, let's just do it again.
Yeah.
But it's also like, we've kind of seen the same faces in every Adidas commercial for the last year, you know? You have Pogba, you have Beckham, you have all of the same kind of people, just in a different scenario. And that's why, to me, when I first watched it, I was like, I feel like I've seen this commercial before. Yeah. And I shouldn't feel like that if it's for the World Cup.
Von Miller again?
I'm pretty sure Von Miller was in it, and it's all the same cast of characters. And it's like, I get it. You have these amazing celebrities, but you're missing the mark because each of these celebrities also has a cultural thing that they could have brought to the table. But yeah, so we'll see what else, if Adidas comes out with another one, what Nike does. But it's just great because it gets you so excited for the World Cup. You have commercials literally every day now talking about the World Cup, and we're so close you can almost taste it.
Yeah, man. Starting to get like the nervous chills when I wake up. Be like, oh, game time's almost here. I know I shouldn't be this nervous, but I definitely am.
Right, moving on to the next quick little topic. What team or who will have the best hairstyles in the World Cup?
Oh, come on. You know what I'm going to say here.
I asked this because every World Cup, it seems that on top of being, a global display for soccer skill and for the sport, teams or players will also take it to help their personal brand, just be crazy and weird. I mean, I think back in the 2000s at some point, I think it was Serbia or Slovakia, they decided to all go Slim Shady. They shaved their heads and then bleached it, and the whole team looked identical.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll ask two questions. What team will have the best hairstyles overall? And then who, by themselves, will have the best hairstyle?
So mine both go kind of to the same country and nationality, I guess. Paul Pogba is going to have the best individual hair. He might be competing with Neymar. I don't know if Neymar is going to keep his Jerry curls, but we'll see. And I think France overall will have the best hairstyle.
I agree with you that I think France will overall have the best hairstyles, especially because you have Pogba, who literally gets a haircut every single week.
Yeah.
You have Olivier Giroud, who just has beautiful flowing locks. Antoine Griezmann, has he shaved his hair?
He cut it short, but he grows out some luscious locks as well.
So I think France will be a team to watch out for in terms of hairstyles and even styles. Helen and I had this conversation in a group text we have with some friends earlier this week about, I was like, is the Jerry curls that Neymar is rocking the look of the World Cup?
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of hoping because, Brazil always has someone with some crazy hair. So it's like.
And for people wondering why Louis brought this up in a group chat with a bunch of dudes, we actually talk about Neymar's hair a lot. And it's like basically his haircut will determine how well he's going to play for us. Yeah. But like he has some iconic looks that you just know he's going to be on fire when he's got the haircut. So I don't know. I think he's been playing well with the Jerry curls, so I think he's going to keep it. Yeah. I think if he were going to make a change, he would have made it, kind of tested it out on the pitch. So
here's the thing. There was an interview that he did for a YouTube channel that I watched recently, and it was someone was talking to him about hair. They're like, hey, so is this the look you're going with? What are you planning? He says, I have something planned, but I'm not telling people what it is.
Ooh.
And so I kept an eye out last weekend with their first friendly, still rocking the Jerry curls. Yeah. I haven't seen any new pictures of him yet. So I'm assuming he's still going to be rocking the kind of Jerry curl look on Sunday when they have their next friendly, which once you hear this podcast, it was a couple days ago. But I think that the first game of the World Cup, Neymar is going to come out with something crazy.
New. Yeah. I don't know, man. He scored a beautiful goal with the Jerry curls. I might not want
to. At that point, you might just have to keep it.
I might have to keep it. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think if not, second. I'm trying to think of all the teams that are in the World Cup right now.
Because if you think about it, I know, like, Mo Salah grew his hair out. He has that curly hair. I think him and Neymar, if they both rock the Jerry curls, you're going to see a lot of people in your town, in your area with the Jerry curls.
I can't grow them out, but I probably would.
Me neither.
I don't know. England might have a good chance at some decent hairstyles, and Brazil as well. I think those three nations probably will be in contention for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see, right? I mean, I think those seem to be the most, like, out there countries. But all right, moving on to something different. With this being the most likely last World Cup for both Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, I think I don't see either of them winning it, but who is more likely to win it, or who is most likely going to benefit the most from this World Cup?
Yeah.
In terms of their legacy.
I think it's hard to say, right? Ronaldo has a European championship, although he wasn't playing in the final. I think that's still
he did get them
right.
There.
No, I absolutely think of it. I'm trying to think of the kind of arguments that people make that he has the blemish of he won it, but he wasn't there for the final. Messi went to the final, didn't win it, so they both kind of really need it. I think obviously whoever wins it will for sure be cemented as the greatest of all time.
If either of them win,
if either of them do, when I look at both of their teams, there's not much there other than them, right? Yeah. Argentina has a good attacking line, but the rest of their team is. I was joking around with Brendan last weekend about how Argentina is basically Liverpool of the international football world, right? They just have an amazing attacking trio individually, but even together they don't really play that well.
Yeah.
And then the rest of their team is just bad. They lost Sergio Romero. He's injured, so then they have a backup keeper, who is a backup, I think, in real life as well. I don't see Argentina doing as well as they did last World Cup.
No.
You know, their team is just so bad. I can't name a decent player behind Messi.
Yeah,
right?
it's difficult. I mean, between the two, I think I'd have to pick Portugal as having the stronger overall side. And so I think that Ronaldo's probably closer to winning it, though I don't see Portugal winning it. I think that if Ronaldo were to retire, or once Cristiano Ronaldo retires, if they were to both retire at the same time, currently I think people might remember Cristiano Ronaldo more fondly because he has a European championship.
Yeah.
Argentina, on the other hand, with Messi, they've won nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, they've made it to a World Cup final, which was probably the first time since Maradona, but making it there and not winning isn't going to do as much for his legacy as, winning it.
I think Messi will be perceived differently inside of Argentina and outside of it, right?
So here's the thing about that. I think that's a super important point. In Argentina, he's actually not as fondly regarded.
People in Argentina weren't that sad when he said he retired. I mean, Maradona has come out and said that like he just doesn't play as well for Argentina as he does for Barcelona. It seems they think that Messi's heart really isn't there.
Yeah.
Which, okay, whatever it may be. Outside of Argentina, I think people really love Messi. They think he's this kind of really down-to-earth guy, whatever it may be. So he may be seen more fondly and appreciated more outside of Argentina than he is in Argentina. Whereas Ronaldo, I feel like across the board he's seen as being great both in Portugal and outside of Portugal. So it's just interesting to kind of see the different dynamics and kind of impact that either one has within their nation, right? You would think that Messi being Messi, that Argentina would back him always, but that's not always the case with him.
Yeah, especially because, he left Argentina at a very young age to go to Barcelona's youth academy, which, in other words, he didn't spend much time in the Argentinians' eye before he went to Spain.
Right.
And so it's this thing where, he's Argentinian, he's their best player, but in the mind of the Argentinians living in Argentina, he is not as big as Maradona. And of course, he can maybe get there if he wins, but it's almost as if he's not as well supported, which is crazy to me. And so we'll see. I mean, if Messi had even won one Copa America, I think the difference in, regard for each of them would be very different. I think that they've both won 5 Ballon d'Ors. They've both won X amount of Champions Leagues. Messi's won 4?
Yeah.
And Ronaldo's won 5. So it's like it's pretty tight there. Absolutely. And everything that they do, it seems like they have a parallel, which I mean, it's phenomenal to be able to watch.
Absolutely.
And it'll be really cool to see them both on the greatest stage. But they've not been known as performers in the World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, they have, of course, but not to a huge degree.
Not to the level that people expect them to be performing for the level of soccer that they produce at the club level. They haven't really done it internationally. Right.
And so, I don't know, man. I don't see either of them making it to a final.
No.
I know that Argentina has a pretty big chance of actually drawing Germany relatively early in the tournament. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And I don't know.
I kind of had a spin-off question for you here, and it's just, I mean, to me, the World Cup, whenever it's that World Cup year, is the most important tournament. Whoever does the best in the World Cup should deserve the Ballon d'Or. With that being said, with the year that Mo Salah has had, even Neymar before the injury, do we see that impacting the race for best player of this year, given what Ronaldo, I mean, he just won the Champions League. Do we see if Neymar has a really good year, wins a World Cup, Mo Salah has for some miraculous way, they end up doing better than Portugal and Ronaldo? Do we see that impacting his Ballon d'Or run? What do you think about that?
I think that winning tournaments has a huge impact on the winner of the Ballon d'Or, or at least it should, right? Not that we've seen that in the past few years. It hasn't necessarily meant that, but I think that if Neymar can take Brazil to the final and win and do so convincingly, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find someone who would disagree that he's the best player in the world for this year.
Right.
He's made it. He's been the runner-up and third place for the Ballon d'Or voting every single year for the past 3-4 years, I think, something like that, since he hit Barcelona, basically. So, he's already been up there in that conversation. So for him, the year he had at PSG before his injury was already absurd. The numbers this man put up at PSG are crazy. Yeah. Sure, you may tell me, but the French league isn't as strong as XYZ league. Well, have you ever looked at the Spanish league outside of Madrid and Barcelona?
Right.
Those 3 clubs, the 2 in Madrid and the 1 in Barcelona, there's not much else in Spain. You know, you can tell me Valencia's okay, sure, but It's the same thing as telling me, you know,
just placeholder teams. Honestly.
Yeah, and so they're not nearly as good overall as, say, the Premier League or the Italian League, but it's the same kind of thing. I think Neymar had an amazing season with PSG prior to his injury. I do think his injury is going to play a role in this.
Yeah.
Mo Salah not winning the Champions League might play a role in it. Then again, of course, he was hurt, so he couldn't impact the game. I think that if Mo Salah can score, first of all, it really depends on which which country gets further into the tournament.
Yeah.
If Egypt can miraculously get out of their group, but on the coattails of Mo Salah's amazing run, I think that has a huge impact on it. I think a lot of people around the world want Mo Salah to be the best player in the world because they've seen how crazy of a season he had.
Right.
But you can't discount Cristiano Ronaldo. It comes into that question that we've already talked about, right? He won the Champions League for the 4th time in 5 years, and he got them there. He was the leading goal scorer in the Champions League with 15. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big number.
Yeah.
And so, he didn't score in the final, but he got them there. You know, that bicycle kick against Juve to beat Juve, that's already a major point for him. It's hard. This year is one of those years where I don't know who wins.
It really depends on what pans out in the World Cup.
Because a lot of times you don't take into consideration that first half of the season. So usually I think a lot of people are going to end their thinking after this World Cup on this past year. So it's like, okay, maybe Mo Salah scores 5 or 6 in the World Cup, gets Egypt on a deep fairy tale run, similar to how Costa Rica did 4 years ago. I think that will play a big role. If Brazil wins and Neymar scores, 8, 9, whatever it is, that's a lot of goals in a World Cup. But if he wins them the World Cup, then I think you have to give it to Neymar if he wins Brazil their World Cup, especially after all that it would mean. But if Cristiano Ronaldo makes it to the semis and scores 6 and really drags Portugal through the tournament, I don't see how you can't give it to him. It's like this. It's a difficult thing.
Yeah, it's hard because you normally don't think of anything ever outshining the Champions League and doing well in the Champions League. But the World Cup is the one tournament where you could really make a case for being best player of the world, depending on how well you play there.
Especially because best player in the world, you're playing against the rest of the players in the world.
Right.
So it's like, geez.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that we haven't really been talking about Messi in this conversation because I don't see Argentina doing too well.
Yeah. Nor do I. I mean, he's had a phenomenal season as well, but I think the conversation has shifted a little bit from Ronaldo and Messi to Ronaldo, Mo Salah, just because of the kind of euphoria that's behind Salah.
Yeah,
and that kind of transitions a little bit into you were mentioning how Egypt could, if they were able to get out of the group, we see a lot of these kind of newcomer nations show up in the World Cup, and I wanted to ask you what you think or who will have the most kind of impact for their nation if they had a good run, right? Imagine Egypt does get out, maybe Saudi Arabia has an amazing moment, Iceland gets out of their group. Who do you think that will mean the most to, right? We know the Brazils and the Germanys, they're kind of used to these having decent runs, going deep in the competitions. If we did see one of these newcomer nations, these underdog nations, as we've been calling them, get out of their group or even have just a really good group stage and kind of have a lot of emotion behind them, who do you think they'll mean the most to?
So I think that all the countries you just mentioned each have something that, if it goes well, will really make an impact, right? So for Iceland to be A, this is their first World Cup. B, their population's only 300-something thousand. So that's not that many people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not a big country. And so, it's also like the smallest nation in terms of population size to ever qualify for a World Cup. So if they were to make it out of their groups, or to make it out of their group, that would be phenomenal.
Right.
I think that any of the predominantly Muslim countries that you just mentioned, Saudi Arabia or Egypt more so because it would continue Mo Salah's legend.
Right.
And also Saudi Arabia, because if a Muslim country does really, really well, it's going to bode really well for the next World Cup.
Right.
I think that is a good thread to follow, especially because we've bashed the Qatar World Cup quite a lot, and it's been bashed across, so many different news channels, so many different news outlets. And I think that any of those countries, if they do really, really well, will really help the next World Cup. But the one country I'm going to go with is Peru. In their friendly that they recently had, that we actually mentioned a little bit at the beginning, 16,000 Peruvians flew from Peru to Switzerland to be in a stadium to support their team.
Right. Those are two countries that are very far apart from each other. And just culturally completely different, right?
Not to mention, this is a friendly warm-up to the World Cup.
And they were playing Saudi Arabia, so it wasn't like they were playing the huge footballing nation.
Yet, they still managed to get 16,000 people into that stadium. And it's... what I find interesting about Peru is that in terms of South American powerhouses, you know, you have, of course, Brazil at the top, Argentina and Uruguay tied with 2 World Cups each. But you've also had countries like Chile who have won the past 2 Copa Americas. Unfortunately, they didn't qualify for this World Cup, but that's another country that's won quite a bit.
Right.
Colombia looking very good, looking very promising. But Peru is a country that you don't talk about in terms of South American countries who are good. And so it's almost like this little brother mentality for them where it's like, damn, we're also South American. We also have a lot of good Peruvian players, but we've never done much on the world stage. This is their first World Cup in 36 years. And so I think that if Peru do really well, I think they actually have a good team. But without... You know, with Guerrero being able to play, I think they have the ability to make some noise. I think they have a lot to give, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, I definitely think Peru's a good shout. I mean, we saw, a lot of episodes back in the history of ours, we talked about how Peru, their fans were out in the streets all night. I mean, they slept in the streets. They were cheering. They were so happy. I think that they'll probably be some of the happier groups. But to me, I think Egypt, if they are able to keep their kind of Cinderella run, we've seen the videos of the grandpas crying and celebrating Mo Salah after the penalty kick that got him in. I don't see them not being the most jubilant fan base out there if they are able to do that. And not even that, probably Liverpool fans also supporting Egypt because of Mo Salah, right? So I think they're going to have just an overall... so much energy behind them that I think that if they were to have a really good run, you're going to see some amazing scenes come out of Egypt. Yeah,
I mean, I just think back to the videos of Cairo when they qualified. My God, man, that was insane. Yeah. I think, Iceland. Going back to Iceland, though, they seem to have this spirit about them with like the Viking clap and all of these big culturally relevant kind of things that if Iceland does well, it'd be really amazing to see.
For their size, I mean, Iceland is kind of one of the most united nations I've ever seen. They just support all of their athletes or anything that anyone's doing because they are so small. They just support that person or team or organization so much.
It's like a clan mentality.
Yeah, no, it really is, and that's going to be something to look out for in the stadiums, right? They're doing their Viking clap, and that's an intimidating factor in its own. I mean, it'll mean really a lot to everyone.
Of course.
But I think Peru and Egypt will see the most kind of spectacle of celebration if we do get something good out of them.
And those are like the moments you look forward to watching, right? The World Cup, yes, the sport itself is amazing, but you don't just watch the World Cup for the sport. You watch it for the spectacle. You watch it for what it means. You watch it for all of these things. And so for Egypt or Peru or Iceland or any of these smaller nations to do well, one that we didn't mention that I think could also be impacted is Russia. If Russia actually do decent and get out of their group, no one's expecting them to do anything. Their team is not even as good as it was 4 years ago. Their team has been on a bad turn, and, hey, maybe doping other athletes helps them out. Maybe they get second place in their group by, I don't know, doing something. But I think that would mean a lot. I don't see them doing that.
Yeah, I don't think that their team is well equipped for this World Cup. But I mean, in your home nation, if they're getting a good run, soccer is very important to the Russian people. I think we overlook that a lot. But I mean, soccer, they do have hooligans for a reason. Although they use the sport as a kind of convoy to disrupt people with, but they do really support their clubs.
Of course, and they also, they have some World Cup history that when it was the Soviet Union, they used to make it pretty far into the tournament. And so I think that we talk a lot about the bad parts about the Russian World Cup. I do think that for the Russian people, on the good side, every host nation gets a boost, whether that was South Africa in the 2010 World Cup, Brazil in 2014, all of these countries, they get a boost, South Korea, famously in 2002, they were co-hosts with Japan. They made it so far into the tournament off of the back of their home support, you know what I mean? I think they made it into the quarterfinals. They played pretty well all the way through. And the best part about the World Cup is that we can sit here and talk about, you have a bunch of podcasts, a bunch of other, commentators talking about, who's more likely to do this and what team is better, but all of that is you're thinking about it. It's not the actual
it's not
game.
Actually what's happening.
The best part about a tournament is that at any moment some shit can go wrong, right? If someone gets a red card, a team gets overwhelmed. There's a lot of these things that can happen, and that's what makes it interesting. It's not just like, okay, this guy's the best, he's going to win. It's a matter of they still have to play the games,
Yeah.
So
I mean, here it's the one tournament in the world where all the eyes on earth are watching you. So the pressure is something that we can't fathom, because I haven't felt pressure like that ever in my entire life, or even a fraction of it. So, I mean, we've seen it, right, before. Big teams crumbling, teams not getting out of their groups. It's definitely possible, so it's going to be interesting.
Wasn't Italy famous last World Cup for basically shitting the bed completely? Like, the whole team just kind of collapsed into it. And France did it a few years back, too.
2 World Cups ago.
France they had a big fight in their training ground, and all of their players just refused to play and, basically caused this whole uproar, and that ended up ending France's World Cup prematurely, of course. And so it's like, you never know what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
The pressure hits, some shit's going to go down, and something can happen. You can just think about all the crazy stories you've heard about the World Cup. I think back to, I think in 2000 or in 98 when Roy Keane was one of the players in Ireland, and he got into a huge fight with the manager, and that ended Ireland's World Cup. So you have a lot of these things that can happen out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so bringing that back, I mean, you never know. Maybe someone in Russia's group collapses and Russia takes advantage and their home support helps them through. So that could be another thing. And so kind of piggybacking off of that last question of which of these newcomer countries will have the most impact, what country outside, of course, for the two of us, Brazil, do you think excites you the most?
This is a good question, because I have a couple of teams that I'm interested in how well they do. England, for the case being that for the first time in a long time, I actually think they have a young squad that's kind of... I don't want to say there isn't pressure on them, because we've talked about the Raheem Sterling issue and how there definitely is a lot of issues that come with being an England player. But they're a team filled with young players that have exciting facets to their game. Dele Alli, Raheem Sterling, Harry Kane, all these players that kind of, we've seen that they can do really great things. So it'll be interesting to see if they can produce it now on a world stage. And also Belgium. Belgium to me is interesting because I always call them kind of a hipster team, because people always say they're going to have a good run, but I find it really hard for teams without any history in the sport to really go far, and that may be such an arbitrary thing to claim it by, but you regularly don't see teams that don't have any footballing history really progress far in a tournament. But Belgium's squad, let me tell you, is fucking loaded, right?
Position by position.
They are Kevin De Bruyne, Lukaku, all these guys that are big name players. They're there. At
every position, they have a one or two players within the top 10 in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, they're one of the most loaded teams in the World Cup. So it's going to be really exciting to see if they can actually produce to the level that people think that they can produce.
And be a new time winner, potentially.
Maybe.
I mean, it's been, out of the, 20-something World Cups that have ever happened, only 8 teams have ever won. So it's like...
Yeah, of the teams that have the depth and quality overall, they're definitely up there. It just goes to, it'll be one of those things like, do they have experience in this at this world stage, right? I don't think they do, and they've proven that in prior World Cups that they've competed in, but they're really exciting to me. Along with France, who, I mean, that's another team I think is just super loaded, and they have their team, if you look at it on paper as well, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it'll be exciting, but I think overall, England and Belgium, for me, are the two kind of teams I'm really excited to see if they can produce.
Well, what I find interesting about England is that there is pressure, of course, because the English fans are very demanding, but at the same time, this is different. This isn't the golden generation. You don't have Rooney, you don't have Gerrard, you don't have Frank Lampard, you don't have Beckham.
Right.
Because back in 2006, the English press expected them to win every single game by 17 goals and win the World Cup. Everyone was,
and honestly, they had the team to do that. They should have won. A fantastic team.
Yeah, they had what they called a golden generation, right? But that doesn't always translate to wins. Of course, there were a lot of egos involved in that, and a lot of things just didn't work out. But this English team, they're young. There seems to be less expectations.
Right.
I don't think anyone's touting England to win.
Right.
Aside from a couple people here and there who are just, homers. They want their team to win.
Right.
But none of the expert analysts out there are saying England as a winner. So I think England has a chance to really shock quite a lot of people by making it far and doing it with a young, youthful team. I think Belgium has a great team as well. Like I said, every position, they have one of their players in the top 10 in the world. I mean, you have Thibaut Courtois, Eden Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku. You have players that are just outstanding.
Yeah.
And, their defenders aren't...
Fellaini.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, Fellaini, one of the best midfielders in the planet. You know what I mean? But, I don't know. Outside of Brazil, who excites me the most? That's difficult. Aside from the teams that you mentioned, I don't know. I mean, Spain, I can't wait to see what Spain does, because they hit such a slump in 2014. Like, they went from winning 2 Euros in a World Cup to getting bounced pretty early in the tournament last time. So I'd love to see what Spain do, because a lot of people are touting Spain as their champion. I don't see Spain winning, but they're also that thing, right, where they have a phenomenal team. They're young. I think there's less expectations on them. That it's a similar situation to England, right? I think that for the last World Cup, there was a lot of expectations on Spain, right?
Yeah.
And they were expected to follow up with their success, despite the fact that it's a little unrealistic, right? And so, but then you get to this year where they seem to have regrouped their team and brought some young, youthful players into it. I'd love to see what Spain will do as well. I think that aside from the 3 teams you mentioned, I'd want to add Spain into that conversation of interesting. And, of course, Argentina and Portugal to see what they end up doing. But
yeah. No, I think we'll see if anything different pans out. But, I mean, on paper, those teams seem to be kind of the teams to kind of want to watch out and see if they perform to the level we think they can.
Right. And so above those teams, I think in my mind, there's a smaller group of teams that actually have a chance of winning the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I kind of just wanted to go through and examine and talk about for which country will winning the World Cup have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking in terms of Brazil, Germany, Argentina, I guess, right? Belgium, Spain, all of these countries that we just mentioned, which one of them do you think is going to have the biggest, for which one of those will winning the World Cup have the biggest impact? And I know this seems like a silly question because winning a World Cup, major impact, but let's examine it.
Yeah, I mean, without being a homer, I think Brazil, right? I think Brazil has kind of hit a point now, a critical point in their history where I think they need to win this one. Over the last few years, we've seen a lack of that joga bonito, that kind of traditional Brazilian style, that flair, that happiness that comes when you think of Brazil and soccer. Last World Cup, I mean, being in Brazil, we saw how spectacularly Brazil crashed out of that. That's left a huge scar, one that a lot of Brazilians are still getting over till this day.
Tell me about it.
I think that they need it more than any of the other countries that were mentioned that could potentially win it. I think they need it in order to kind of revitalize their personal image of who they are as a soccer nation. I think the players need it. I think they need it because they want the world to understand that they're not down and they're not out just yet. And also just for the culture of the sport, right? I think that they need to prove that soccer still is what makes Brazil. I think that it's something we talk about all the time, that without soccer, Brazil would be a totally different country.
Right.
A lot of people only know Brazil for soccer. So
or for the beauty, right? Like the soccer, the beaches,
absolutely.
Everything on that side.
But if they lose that, right, if they lose the title of not being the best footballing nation in the world, they lose a lot of what makes them them. So
I think that you have hit a lot of good points, and to really kind of continue on with of what it means to the country of Brazil, since the last World Cup, right before the 2014 World Cup, Brazil was on the upswing. It was named as one of the best up-and-coming countries, had one of the best up-and-coming economies shortly before the World Cup, and it has spectacularly as Brazil crashed out of the World Cup, the Brazilian country has also crashed terribly. They've impeached a president. They went to impeach the other president, and then the Congress was like, you know what? Do we really want to do this again? So now he's still there, despite the fact that they all know that he's a crook.
Yeah.
The country's going through a big scandal right now. Like, the country's just in disarray since the last World Cup. And I think that the embarrassment we suffered at the hands of Germany was just so shocking.
Yeah.
You're the host country. You had one of the best players in the tournament in Neymar, who had scored up until that point 5 goals, I believe. So in other words, was in competition for like the golden boot of the tournament, best player of the tournament. Crashes out, doesn't play against Germany. Our country gets embarrassed in front of the whole world in, quite honestly, one of the worst losses ever.
Yeah. I'd say probably the worst loss ever, considering the stage and just what it meant, where it was held. I mean, I think
that all of that plays a huge role. And like you said, Brazil hasn't won a World Cup since 2002. We've gone through a few golden generations ourselves of we need them to win, it's going to win, and it just not working out.
Right.
But I think that this tournament is different for Brazil. They brought back the classical Brazilian style of love. Like, let's play beautifully. Watch Neymar play, it's like that's Brazil.
Yeah.
Distilled down to like a T, but it's not. They're not so reliant on Brazil. Or I'm sorry, they're not so reliant on Neymar this time around. They have an actual supporting cast around him. To give you an idea, Neymar wasn't the leading goal scorer in the qualification. It was Paulinho.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Craziness. Yeah. But I think that to look at other countries, I think that for Germany, them winning again will just solidify everything they did, right? And we've talked about this before, how in the 2000s, Germany had gone through a really bad period of time where they're like, our country's not good at soccer anymore. We don't seem to be doing very well. So they revamped the whole thing. They started down from the lower levels. They started with the youth development to the day where they now created their golden generation of German players. And they won the World Cup, right? And so if they win another World Cup, that levels them with Brazil. So I think that'll mean a lot to the German people because that means that both countries are equal with 5 World Cups.
So, given everything you've just said, what do you think that will do to Brazil if Germany wins another World Cup?
If Brazil, I hope it just lights another fire under Brazil, right? I hope they don't take it to the point where it just dismantles everything because I think that Brazil has such a rich soccer history that I hope it doesn't destroy everything.
Do you think it would? Do you think it would ruin the image that people have of Brazil? Like, if Germany is now tied with them in World Cups, does Brazil lose that title of being the soccer nation? The soccer nation.
I think it does. I think that at least for the period in between neither country ever winning again, they'll have to share it. Because Germany's innovated, they have done so much that you kind of almost have to give it to Germany as being, if they win this one, to being the soccer nation with that German precision and just everything about it. I think that hopefully would light a fire in Brazil to be like, no, we gotta win this one next time around because the Brazil team is very young. This is a very youthful Brazil squad.
Yeah.
They have, Neymar's only 26. A lot of Gabriel Jesus is 21. A lot of these players are relatively young, so if they don't win this one, it will be hard to deal with.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be as devastating as the last World Cup loss, but at the same time, I think it will just light a fire in the hopes that the next time around they would win. But I think that this also, they'd have to share it. If Germany wins, you can't just say that Brazil is the soccer nation. You know what I mean? I think it'd be devastating for the Brazilian people to lose that. It's like you said, it's something that we identify ourselves with very wholeheartedly because the country is how it is, and it's had its ups and downs. Soccer's been its only constant. We've been great at soccer.
A few bright spots, I think, in a nation that's been plagued with some, unfortunately, bad news always, but.
Yeah, I think that, expanding this conversation outside of just those two countries, I think that, let's say France were to win it, I think it'd be hugely important because France is another nation that has World Cup history. It would be really great for them to be able to announce their return to the global stage because it seems like they have all the pieces in place. Yeah. I think that, like we discussed last week, one of the things that really impact it is the coaching. I think the coaching is where they're lacking. But other than that, I think that France winning it would be really, really important for them, and they would have a big impact.
Yeah, especially given the team that they have around there. Their superstar I mean, at almost every position. I think it's hard for you to point out a player on their starting 11 that isn't a superstar. Their bench, I mean, look at the people that they left out. The Karim Benzema, like, come on, there's a striker for Real Madrid, and he's not being called, right? So I think that they have really high expectations this year, and for them it definitely, especially with the way they fell out in the Euros, they want to experience some type of joy with the current crop of players they have now. So I could definitely see it meaning a lot to them as well.
So to kind of wrap up, if you had to pick one country that has never won a World Cup before that has the best chance of winning this one, who would you pick?
I mean, I've got to say Belgium, right? They're just too good at the positions. Too many superstars for me not to say them. But I don't want to keep harping on it, but they just seem like they crumble when it comes to this stage.
Like they're lacking something.
Something
you
is
don't know
missing.
what it is,
I don't know, but so I say it kind of half-hearted. I'm saying it just based off the names that I see on the team sheet. But I think on paper that they're the team for me that hasn't won one that has the best chance.
I actually really gonna say Portugal.
Really,
I think that. I want to say Belgium. I do. I think that they, like you said, they have players at every position.
Yeah.
But Portugal have Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
You know, and like we've said, he maybe hasn't produced as much for Portugal, but I actually think they have a good squad this year. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't trust anyone that isn't Cristiano Ronaldo on that team. But to your point, my dad always says is that you can't win a World Cup without a superstar. Even if it's only one, you can't win a World Cup without a superstar. So I do think that's a pretty good pick.
Yeah, I think that it'll be really interesting to see.
If there's anyone on earth that can carry a team, it's Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, he's done it.
Very few players in the world that can do it, and he's definitely one of them. So I think that's definitely a good shout.
Right, to end it, I'm going to ask a question that I know the answer to, but who wins the World Cup?
Brazil, Neymar leading scorer.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. And you could sue us if you want, but that's
just the way
it is. I don't think we're being deceptively too homer-ish. I think Brazil actually has one of the best squads and the best coaching.
Yeah.
So, and the Brazilian flair. You can't discount the Brazilian flair.
Yeah.
I think, and they need it, man. Like I said, Brazil needs this win. And I was having this discussion, and the question was, if you had to pick between two possible finals, Brazil playing Argentina or Brazil playing Germany in the World Cup final, which final would you prefer?
Yeah, I was a part of this conversation, and I said Germany, and the reason why is because I need them to get one over on them and show them that last World Cup was just a mental lapse that happened as a team. Argentina, whatever, we'll get them sometime next time, and who really cares, but the wound is still very much open on that Germany loss. So definitely would love to see a Brazil-Germany final and get one over on them.
Yeah, and I would think that if Brazil do win this World Cup without beating Germany at some point, it's still
something they can hang over your head, right? Yeah. I think beating them in a final would be like, okay, you beat us 7-1, but if we came
we are
back,
at the biggest stage in the final to kill you. Yeah. You know, I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that, I think that was a good wrap-up.
Yeah. World Cup is here. Go find your ancestry, see what nation you can most identify with, and get behind them.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you made it this far into the podcast, you are officially ready for the World Cup. If you have any questions, comments regarding the World Cup, your favorite team, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to also comment who you think is going to win the World Cup so that you can enter for a chance to win our World Cup gift package. That's enough for us. I hope you're ready for the World Cup. Subscribe to the podcast and tune in next week for our next episode.